Good afternoon. This is Attorney Talib Kareem with STEM4US, and we have another exciting conversation with one of the nation's top cyber educators. And I want to also say for all of those who are observing this really special month of Ramadan Kareem or Ramadan Mubarak. We're really, again, um, particularly grateful that it just so happens that our guest is also, I believe, observing this special month. So we look forward to having a wonderful conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so you can get updates on all of our upcoming events and programs. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put those questions into the chat either on YouTube or Facebook, and hit that like button too. We want to make sure that if you like it, you let us know. We look forward to engaging with you. And without any further ado, let me bring on our guest, Fatima Iqbal-Zubair, and she is coming to us from where?
I am in Southern California, so I am in a community called Carson, California.
Carson, California. Well, that is wonderful. And I'll share my own connections to Carson. My mother grew up in Los Angeles, and she went to Fairmont High School. I don't know if you know of the legendary
Yeah, I've heard of it.
school. It's now, I understand, has been converted into a clinic, actually, by one of the Muslim health organizations there. So, ironically, while my mother, when she was attending the high school, wasn't a Muslim, she, later became a Muslim before I was born. And I'm, just so happens that I understand, would be representing that particular community, if I'm not mistaken. Is that in your district, by the way?
I don't know if Fairmont is that the name of the community, Fairmont as well?
No, I don't know if it's the name of the community, but it's a part of Los Angeles, and the reason why I mention that also is because, again, by happenstance, true, or by actually not happenstance, but as the Almighty would have it, when I graduated from high school, I went to the Air Force Academy initially, but then I transferred from the Air Force Academy to Howard University. And when I came to Howard University, I went to get a job so I could help to, put myself through college on Capitol Hill. And I went to my congressman from the community where I grew up in Detroit, and there were no jobs there. And so I went to the job where I went to the congressman's office that was representing my father's city, which was Memphis, and there were no jobs there. But since I had told him that I was going to Howard University, he sent me to the other congressman who was a colleague of his from Howard University, and that colleague just so happened to work for the congressman representing Carson and Gardenia and Compton
Right.
and
Oh,
Watts. And that was none other than the former Lieutenant Governor of California, Mervyn Dimely. And as it just so happened, Mervyn Dimely, his original name was Dim Ali, um, and so he came out of the West Indian community, the Trinidadian community, where a number of the Trinidadians had Islamic heritage and influences, and so um, I was hired to work for him, and from my understanding, he again served in the position where you're initially before becoming
yes.
lieutenant governor. He was an assembly member,
Oh,
and in fact, I think he was the California Assembly. He was the Speaker of the House, if I'm not mistaken. Before becoming the lieutenant governor. So I am honored to have this opportunity to have you as our guest and to have you as one of our STEM partners. And we look forward to getting into the nitty gritty of, first and foremost, maybe you can start with telling me who is Fatima Iqbal-Zubair.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Brother Talu. I really appreciate it. And I didn't know all those connections. That's so interesting, and so yeah, it's just such a coincidence, right? So who am I? So I consider myself very
And can you
multicultural.
speak up a little bit, because I don't know if everybody's hearing the
Can you hear me?
sound.
Here, can you
Yeah,
hear
I can
me?
hear you,
Can you hear me?
but the
Okay. Let me
sound
move.
is a little
Okay.
faint.
How is it now?
Okay,
Is it
good.
is it okay now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. I'll try to speak up a little bit then. Yeah. So I consider myself very multicultural because I've lived in many countries. I was born in the Middle East, near Dubai, in a town called Al Ain. Lived there for 7 years, but my heritage is Sri Lankan. So I only lived in Sri Lanka for 8 months, but my parents are from there. And then the Gulf War was starting, when I was around 7 years old, or about to start. So my parents immigrated to Canada. So I lived in a province called Saskatchewan, and
Is
when
that
I
in the west or the
it's in
eastern province?
central Canada.
Central.
Central. It's
Okay,
one of the
okay.
one of the prairie provinces. Yeah, and then when I was about to start high school, my parents immigrated to the U.S. and I lived in New Jersey, in Bergen County, very close to New York, and came out here to California in 2009. Even initially, when I moved to California, I lived for a little bit in Costa Mesa, kind of in Orange County, and then most of my time has been in LA County, and about a decade here in Carson.
Is that where
Um,
you went to college?
no, I went to college in New Jersey. So I went to college. It was called Ramapo College of New Jersey. It's a public liberal arts college. So that's where I went to college. I actually studied for a little bit in the Caribbean as well. So for grad school. And when I was in California, I got my teaching credential. So there's a little gap where, I didn't know if I wanted to be a teacher. And it was really happenstance that I started tutoring kids, all over, nursing students, science students from every age. And I really enjoyed, working in low income communities of color. I noticed that. And so I started, while I was tutoring, I then coached a team in Wilmington in my district, a cross country team. Because a big part of me is also I'm an athlete. I ran cross country and track. I was actually cross country state champion in high school. I had the 10K record in my college as well. And
Subhanallah. So so you were one of those people like Ibtihaj Muhammad who was
no, oh
out
my
there in
God.
the field with your hijab on.
Well, so I actually started wearing hijab when when I was 26.
Okay.
But when I did run track, I didn't wear shorts. I would, like, I look different. I still look different compared to the other track athletes. I just didn't wear hijab then. But
Okay.
I still, by the way, I still do it now. I still do, CrossFit. I do running and everything. And but that's a big part of me. So I coached for about a year, and that led me to realize I'm really, one thing I'm really good at is inspiring groups of kids and kind of conveying knowledge. Right, that's a big part of our faith as well. And so I decided I wanted to go work in Watts. And so that's where my journey has taken me, and that really, changed my life in many ways. I'm sure we're going to get into that. I know I look at the questions coming up, but that's a little bit about me. A couple of things I forgot to mention is I'm a mom as well. My son, Alhamdulillah, is adopted from Morocco. When he was 6 months old, he has autism, but that he's a very special part of my life, and obviously that's affected my journey as well as an activist. Um, I'm also an immigrant, and I think anyone living in, having been in America post 9/11, right, and being an immigrant, that's also changed our life in many ways, and especially, being visibly Muslim, right, post 9/11 brings with it, certain things, and I'm grateful I'm in California because when 9/11 happened, I was actually near the attack, unfortunately, and for the most part, the community there was really supportive. But you have a few people that were Islamophobic, so I've definitely been through some of that with me and my family. So that's shaped me as well. So those are a few aspects of my identity that I think are really important.
Great, great. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad to learn that. Now, tell me about your background as an educator, particularly in the STEM or cyber area. How do you touch cyber education or STEM education in your work?
Yes, very good question. I was science department chair at Watts, and so I was always about bringing new technology, project-based learning. And I think especially, Brother Talib, in lower income communities, that's missing. That's simply missing. A lot of the times, really fun STEM activities, technology takes a lot of, oh, I don't see you.
Yes, keep on talking.
Oh, you're there. Okay, okay. I thought you weren't there. A lot of the times that takes money, right, and that takes resources, and that was missing. So part of the reason, before I went to Watts, my husband is actually a really great community advocate as well, and his passion is really STEM education also. So he founded a robotics team in El Segundo called Team 4201, the Vitruvian bots. It's part of this program called FIRST. They're the largest nonprofit and provider of STEM education worldwide. And I was just inspired, by this program. I would go to competitions and I would notice that there were a lot of students of color missing. Right, it was mostly schools that were able to have the resources. There were some schools, I saw some Black and brown students and low income students, but rarely any. And so I made it my mission to start a team in Watts. And so I founded the first robotics team there. And so thankfully our team, has done really well. We won a few competitions. We've been on the media a few times, but what's most important to me is that, Watts has a college grad rate of under 3%, but my students, over 90% are in a four-year college right now. And so I'm really proud of that statistic because it shows how, STEM education, right, is so important. When you think about the future of the economy, 80% of the jobs in the future are going to be in STEM. So I feel like the small part I was able to do in bridging that gap, really, really warmed my heart. I always get a lot from my students, but the fact that I was able to provide something that really inspired them, that got them working with engineers, with, those who code, with, just collaborate in a collaborative team environment, it really made a difference to their life, especially in the low income community. And I'm grateful to be able to be a part of providing that.
So tell me about your journey into politics and how did that connect with your work as an educator?
Yeah, that is where I'm at now. I am a candidate right now for state assembly. And how did I get here? I honestly, I didn't think I would be here. It was kind of an unexpected journey for me. I wasn't kind of in the weeds of the Democratic Party or any political party and, plan 10 years ahead that this is what's going to happen. I wasn't the kid in high school that said, I want to be president, right? I think a part of my life, honestly, was always that I knew I wanted to make a difference, right? It starts there. A large part of our faith says when you see injustice, we have to do something, right? The least we can do is think that it's wrong, but the most we can do is actually in action. And that's what it was really always about that for me. When I was first teaching, I saw a lot of the inequities and I told myself, okay, I'm going to create an army, right, of students who are going to go to college, or be successful in whatever way they see and come back and be leaders in Watts, come back and be leaders in South LA. And that was enough, for a year or two for me. But then I got to see that so many inequities as I was organizing more in the community of environmental injustices and coming up against roadblocks of funding when I was trying to bring programs. And I saw that what I can just do in the classroom is limited in terms of some of these larger systemic issues. So in going out, in continuing organizing, I got to know my opponent's record actually through another environmental activist. She said, why don't we look at it? Why don't we see what the leaders are actually, how they're actually doing on this? And sadly, it broke my heart. I remember the moment I was in my living room, Brother Talib, in my living room, I had tears in my eyes looking at my opponent's record. Now my current opponent's record. Back then, he's still my representative. He's I'm a constituent. It broke my heart, not more for my family, but for my students. Thinking about, how a lot of the people in power have the power to really control the quality of the drinking water, the public funding, the healthcare, issues, the criminal justice issues, which was really prevalent with my students as well in Watts, and simply didn't do enough, or sometimes did the opposite of what was in their best interest. And it was shortly thereafter, I looked into it. I said, well, no one's ever run against him. If not now, when? And if not me, who, right? And so it was kind of one of those things where I wanted to, again, a large part was my faith, step in and not have fear of, look, I am this teacher that's stepping in the political world, which is sometimes scary, but I wasn't really scared because I knew that I was doing it for the right reasons. I knew that I was doing it for justice. And I knew that I would always carry the voice of the community with me, and I trusted myself in that. And so that's why I did it.
So let me ask you this question. I think that probably at the top of a lot of people's mind as you think about politics is the recent, um, verdict in the Derek Chauvin, George Floyd case. And while people celebrate, um, that justice was finally done after having so many cases where justice was not rendered, such as the Eric Gardner case, and just all of the cases probably that we could like name. But um, let me ask you, and even there, with the famous case of Rodney King, right, in
In
California.
what? Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the Watts riots in the
Riots, yeah.
90s. But, you know, let me ask you this question because I know that a lot of people, still are thinking about this, and that is, you know, is politics, does politics really even matter? You know, do you, all the work that you have to do in order to get into this office, raise more money than you would even be paid, to serve in the office, um, you know, getting money from people who don't even live in the community where you serve.
Mm.
How, you know, how can you really make a difference? That's a lot of people are still, really questioning this system. Do you really believe that you can make a difference?
That's a great question, and I don't even, I'm glad you asked it. I've talked to leaders in Watts, community leaders, Brother Talib, that say they don't vote, right? Because of the reason you're saying. They're like, well, we voted and it hasn't really, made any changes. It hasn't really created the sort of systemic changes we want to see. And oftentimes when they organize together, they're able to do more local changes, right? So they've resorted to that. So it's a very good question. Um, and if you asked me this 10 years ago, I might have agreed with you. I might have said, I don't know. I don't believe in politics. I wasn't really involved even as a volunteer. But honestly, it's been learning the system. Honestly, I'm a teacher, so I read and I read and I read and I don't just take things at face value, particularly in California politics. If you look at how much the police unions, the police associations, the oil companies, the developers, are putting into these candidates' re-elections, are putting into, you know, um, just making sure that corporations, that the police, that the criminal justice system is really against the side of the victims, right? It is a pay to play system. And so I literally, when I was running last time, I was able to, pinpoint when my opponent would get money and how he would vote. And it was a direct correlation. And you see this because there are people that get elected and that don't take this money, and you see the sorts of legislation they're proposing, right, in terms of criminal justice reform. And I'll give you a difference. My opponent, proposed a bill to ban chokeholds, right? And it was called, it's a great bill. It's very symbolic about after what happened to George Floyd. But the truth is, this bill has been, this sort of measure, right, has been there in all of LA County, and so I believe in Chicago PD, they banned chokeholds. It hasn't really done anything. So it's not really a systemic bill, right? What we need is things like ending qualified immunity. What we need is banning police money that's going to candidates. What we need is ending the death penalty, right? What we need is changing the sentencing, the sort of sentencing we have in the state. Um, what we need is looking at a decarceration budget rather than focusing it all on incarceration, right? So those are the sorts of things that we need. What we need is investing in communities, in schools, in healthcare, right? These are the kind of things that change communities, and it is possible because and my evidence is, if you look at candidates that are elected, we have a couple in the state legislature right now, and you look at the bills they're proposing, right? It is drastically different than the ones that are corporate funded, right? And if we just need more unbought politicians in there who really their only interest is the people, because that's who's funding their campaign, right? Anyway, right? Their only interest is the community, right? Because they're just trying to get the votes instead of, let me have Chevron on speed dial. Let me have this police association on speed dial to tell me how I should vote on this bill because they're funding my campaign. So I really believe those changes are possible. If you look at like I said, those candidates, they're not many. So that's why we're not seeing the changes that we need. But I really believe over time we'll see many of these candidates, and we will see the changes, that will really, really be able to change the community, and change some of these marginalized spaces. So I do believe that it is a mechanism, but we need to work, and as a community, as voters, as constituents, we need to understand the system and work to support those sorts of causes and candidates, because that's how we're going to get there, right? We're going to get there through people power and people really understanding the system and acting to change it.
And let me ask you this, going to maybe something you would directly be able to make an impact on, and that is the issue of policing. And this is a two-part question. One, even though Derek Chauvin was convicted, following George Floyd's killing, there were about 64 people who were killed by police in the time span between when George Floyd was killed last year and the verdict earlier this week. 64. And the majority of them were people of color, or at least half of them. But quite frankly, it doesn't make a difference. What color they are. Quite frankly, a killing by a police officer, particularly of an unarmed person, is a crime against humanity, right? So the question is, are you of the camp that you think that police officers can just be trained and or retrained or get some extra training and they'll start killing people? Or do you think that the institution itself, which started from the time of enslavement, is systematically set up to essentially bring about these types of results, because they've been trained to essentially demonize or penalize or employ force, and in many cases deadly force. So do you think that it can be changed and improved, or you think that we probably need to just scrap the police institution and create a new, like, service-oriented institution where, for example, you might not have guns, as they don't have guns in many countries? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm of the second camp. So I completely look at the history of how policing was created. I look at, is it really public safety, right, when so many police killings are happening? And I look at, like you said, right, there were 64 shootings since George Floyd, and unfortunately 3 of them, were in or near my district, actually, in South LA. And so, yeah, I'm of the camp that we have to completely revolutionize the way we look at public safety. That because, right now, with what's happening, it's not really the public that's being taken care of. I feel like the public, in a sense, in the system of policing, is being frankly policed, is being in many cases terrorized. And I do believe that, guns aren't needed in most situations, in fact, right? Maybe in the cases of extreme, homicides or crimes, but in most situations, guns aren't needed. What we need is mental health professionals. What we need is social workers. What we need is investment in schools, right? Investment after school programs and things like what you're doing. That's what we need more of to really change. That to me is part of public safety, right? A community is safe when it's able to thrive, when it has programs to thrive. A community is safe when it feels safe. I know even me, Brother Talib, I thought of this. For me, I am not a Black or Latino woman, but I'm a woman of color. But to me, when I see a police officer, I get fear stirred up in me, and I'm sure you as a Black man feel that even more, right? But I get fear, and that's not normal. That's not me feeling safe, right? And so I don't think that's the fault of the police officer, but at the same time, it is part of the system where I'm feeling terrorized, to be honest. And I know a lot of my students must be feeling even more terrorized, going to their home in the projects in Watts every day, right? And so I definitely believe that we need to reimagine policing in this country. And it starts with things we can do, like ending qualified immunity and holding them accountable. I think part of the reason policing has been able to come to be this sort of thing. Yes, it started in a wrong foot, but it's allowed to kind of prosper in its terrorizing and suppression because of things like, qualified immunity, for example, and where we're not able to hold police officers accountable for when things happen. And I think it is because of the influence of how these police associations are controlling politicians and kind of disrupting the sort of reforms that we need. And so I'm definitely of the second camp. Like you said, I definitely think we need to reimagine what public safety really is. And we need to look at, like you mentioned, other countries. And even, in fact, I believe other communities around the US, other cities are trying different things with policing and demilitarizing police, things of that nature. And so I think definitely we need to be looking at that. And that's part of the reason I'm running. I frankly am frustrated that so many of these killings, Andres Guardado, a young Latino male, died 10 minutes, from my home. That could be my son, right? Walking, it's only 10 minutes. I mean, so when he's a teenager, that could be him. And things like that really affect me personally, living in a community like South LA. But like I said, none of us should feel fear when we see a police officer. And part of the reason we do is because of the system that right now, unfortunately, is in many cases terrorizing communities, right, rather than protecting it.
Well, you have a very good point. And so let me give you the second question. And the second question is, do you believe police officers should be in schools? There's a big debate, particularly in this region, but I'm sure it's all around the country, about what is the role of police officers in school. And and let me just tell you, even at my own daughter's school, there is a police officer, albeit it's she's in school. And I'm going to get to this another question I'm going to ask you, but she's in school outdoors, but the police officer is there to direct traffic. But this is a police officer with full tactical, gear on, and so I asked the school head, why did we have a, basically kind of a armed, almost kind of like military, looking, Iraq war type of, weaponry, outfitted police officer directing, cars in and out of the schools with a police car, literally with the police lights on at the, beginning of the driveway. And I was like, do you see a problem with that? And she didn't necessarily see what I saw. And so I'm asking you, do you see a problem with this type of presence, this type of police presence? Should students be, basically conditioned at 7, 8, and 5, and 4, and 3, and 10, or even 15, 16, 17? Should they be conditioned to see police in their spaces of education, which is supposed to be a safe space? What do you think about that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think it's appalling that that's happening. I know even when I was in Watts, things would happen where my kids would get randomly searched. It would be sad. I would go down to my prep period and like the admin would know the police officers and they had guns and they were armed. They would come in, and it's like there's no place, right, for a police officer with a gun, on campus, like, or near the campus. I mean, I don't know how old your daughter is, but especially if she's younger, I mean, that's even more traumatizing, right? Because you can't even protect yourself when the younger you are. And when someone has a gun, how do you protect yourself against that? I mean, it's just, it's intimidating. It affects a student's psyche. So I don't believe that, we need that in schools. I remember as a teacher, I was really trained in restorative justice. We had, gang interventionists. We had, our school hired, community kind of safety patrol, but they didn't have any guns. And I remember the way they dealt with students was very relationship oriented, right? And they knew the students inside out, right? And I had a good relationship with them as a teacher. They didn't intimidate me because they didn't have guns. It's so sad, but it's so, understandable, hopefully, to everyone, that when someone is carrying a gun, like, that is a source of fear. That is a weapon, a lethal weapon, right? And so there's absolutely, no place for that in a school. There's no situation where you would need that. And, research shows that, people bring up, honestly, about school shootings. Well, you know what? They've done research that having someone with a gun doesn't it doesn't do anything for a school shooting, right? It doesn't prevent it. So that is a awful argument. And I want to bring up one thing personally I've experienced, because I'm a delegate. I'm a current delegate as well to the Democratic Party. I was in my recent regional meeting, and in fact, I was trying to get support for a resolution to ban school police, from schools, and that was the pushback I got. Well, what about all these the school shootings that are happening, right? And that's just not a valid argument. There's no research that shows that having a police officer with a gun is going to stop that. And the question of safety was brought up, and it's like it just goes to show how tone deaf. Why this is still happening is how tone deaf are in some instances the Democratic Party is, right, and all politicians are, because they do not understand what your daughter is going through or what you're going through as a father seeing that, right? They're so missing from what's happening on the ground with what parents are feeling about this and how teachers are feeling about this, right? And they might be listening to what's happening, these political spaces with all these special influences, with police officers in their ears, with police associations in their ears, but they're not listening to what's happening on the ground, with what's happening to kids, how they're feeling about this, how teachers, parents are feeling about this. And that to me is so sad. It's part of the reason I wanted to get involved. I wanted to make sure that these voices were part of the dialogue and we're at the table, when these decisions are made.
I think that it's important that as you just talked about. And so another question about the issue of policing in school and maybe schools in general is, do you think that it's better for students to be in schools where there are, again, this type of policing, is policing going on, and even cases where students are brutalizing each other? I don't know if you saw this one viral video of unfortunately a Muslim girl being brutalized by another student, and then another student came in to jump in, and then the principal came in to intervene then, right, when the other student, who just so happened to be African American, was intervening on the part of the muhajiba, or student who was Muslim wearing a hijab. And so as a parent, one of the things that I'm looking at is how can you convince me that it's better for me to send my child, my daughter, to schools where she could perhaps be victimized like this little girl was victimized, be she Muslim or non-Muslim, but be victimized by another child who might be going through some type of traumatic, issue, versus having my child educated from the comfort of my home. Especially during time of a pandemic, where the children have to wear their masks, and the teacher has to be not only concerned about children being disciplined and children doing the work in class, but also whether or not the children are going to be engaging in conduct that will help, that will cause them to get COVID. Can you speak to that for a bit?
Yes, I can. I think of, one of the hardest decisions for me was to, run for office only because I would have to leave my position as a full-time teacher, right? I still mentor my robotics team, but I knew that the time it would take would require me to leave. And I remember the first few weeks I left, a sub was coming. I'm going to use this as an example to answer your question. I was able to create a culture in my classroom where, there might be, quote unquote, these problem students, traumatized students, whatever you call it, right? Because I worked in Watts. And I was tested when I first went there as a teacher. Kids try to push back. But once they saw that, there was respect and love from me, and I wasn't going to shame them if they did something, I would rather step outside and talk to them. They grew respect for me. And some of the kids that were the quote unquote most problematic became my classroom helpers, right? Didn't get in trouble. And I noticed when I had to step away and started my campaign, there were subs there, right? And I saw the kids, getting in trouble all of a sudden and talking back, and they never did that with me. And so what that tells me, Brother Talib, is a lot of this has to do with the way we communicate. Yes, we can go deeper. There is trauma, in Watts, right? For the historical trauma, the trauma of maybe having a single family home, of being low income and living in poverty. Yes, our kids are going to go through that there. But then my question is, where are the psychologists in the school? Where are the the mental health professionals, because I know for a fact in Compton that's missing. I know for a fact in even the school I worked in, we had a psychologist only the third year I was there, right? And so I saw the difference that did when we had a psychologist, what that did to me as a teacher, and how comforting my kids had when they needed to talk to someone, they had someone to go talk to. And that drastically reduced incidents like that happened to that girl you talked about, right? Um, and and so I think that that's what we need to invest more in. You know, let's invest more in schools, but not put it in more police. We don't, in that situation you described, right, Brother Talib, how would a policeman with a gun have helped? My fear is someone could have been killed. Even the girl in that situation, right? By an accidental shooting, or if the bullet went another way. So what we need is we need, like, we had safety, folks there. We had folks that were hired for that, but they didn't have guns, right? They had relationships with the students. They were there for those sorts of situations. We need more of those sorts of people in the hallways, right? Who have those relationships with kids, where kids aren't intimidated because they don't have a gun, right? Who come to staff trainings with us. They're part of the staff, right? What we need is psychologists in every school, mental health professionals, gang interventionists. If that the school needs that, fine, bring in gang interventionists, but that are unarmed, that are trained in that sort of intervention, right? Bring in trauma specialists, right? Yes, we need more of that. I'm not saying take the police officers away and we remove safety. So what I would tell a parent is, your fear is warranted. And it is, because right now, yes, maybe the school that your child is going to doesn't have all these resources, right? That kids would need to be, functional, to function in a way that is kind and that is respectful. But then let's invest in that, right? Let's tell the school, the admin, the district, we want to invest more in that, but not necessarily more police officers. That's not what's going to make it safe. And I would, in fact, argue that we could have accidental shootings with police officers with guns there. We could have students getting killed, like that young girl who was actually a victim in that situation. So that would be my answer to that.
So let me ask you another question on the, related, and that is, again, specifically the issue of remote education versus in-person learning. So my daughter has been doing this hybrid model where she's spending part of the day at home and part of the day going to school outdoors. But tomorrow's supposed to be 40 degrees. It was 40 degrees today here in DC. It's supposed to be another 40-degree, start off at least 40 degree, and then by the afternoon warming up to about 50s. It's still 50s outdoors. Does that make sense? Again, taking children who are being taught outdoors, or, should we, again, recognizing all the other issues that they got to deal with in terms of making sure the children are, basically, not doing things where they're going to be inhaling from one another, or, teachers are going to be exposed. I mean, it's a whole litany of things that you got to go into,
Right.
versus being able to have a child who's in the comfort of their home being educated, with other children in the comfort of their home, and the teacher in the comfort of her home, nobody having to worry about their health concerns, or for that matter, having to worry about another child assaulting, another child. I mean, what would you say is? I mean, can you speak to me? What's your opinion about whether or not my daughter's school should be in person or virtual tomorrow, and even in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And my answer would be, I think it depends on the county, depends on the school district, it depends on the community, because I know right now COVID rates are different in different places, right? I know right now some school districts are prepared, some are not. Like you're telling me your daughter's outdoors here in LAUSD, where I am, my son, had the choice to be in hybrid, but they're doing it, I believe, indoors. So I think what I would say is, in terms of that, I think it depends on the school district and the community. And I trust the science, and I trust, I hope that the school districts are making the decision in hand with parents and teachers and, the unions and things like that. It has to be a collaborative effort, right, in deciding how to reopen schools and when. That's important. It has to be based in science and what the COVID rates are and the ability to test. I know here my son's required to test if he goes hybrid once a week. Is that available, right? Are all the teachers vaccinated, right? Any adult on campus can get vaccinated. So I think I'm not really going to answer that for the nation, right? But because I think that's a really local county-based, district-based kind of sort of issue. Because I know we're all at different places in terms of COVID rates and even just resources and COVID testing and vaccinations and things of that nature. So I would really hope that I would just say that I hope that in everywhere it's happening in a collaborative fashion, with parents at the table, with teachers at the table, with the school district, with the county. It has to be really collaborative, and they need to make decisions based on science and availability of resources.
So let me then ask you, I mean, again, in another way, relating to your school district, if you, again, were elected, you would have an impact on, funding at least of schools, as an assembly member, would you support the continuation of funds to provide for teachers to do classes remotely, and even for parents who want to remain at home so they can teach their children or help teach their children? Would you provide even funding for parents who want to basically not only teach their children, or assist the teachers in teaching their children, but let's say they want to basically pull their children out of public schools and homeschool their children? Do you think that the state should provide support for that, especially when we need more cyber and STEM trained students wherever they come from, be it from the public school or from home schools?
Yeah, I do. I definitely do. Let me talk about teachers first. I definitely think that part of the reason I'm running is really to revolutionize education in the state. California, let me just talk about my state. We're the lowest in per pupil funding. We don't fund our school districts. And it's one of the reasons a lot of our public schools are failing, particularly in Black and Brown communities. It's something I experienced firsthand as a teacher, and it's such a dismay because education should be the great equalizer. I believe teachers, should be provided all the resources they need. I know I came up against roadblocks when I wanted certain things for my students and I couldn't get it. I paid a lot out of my own pocket I was a chemistry teacher for a lot of project-based sorts of things I wanted to do. Parents, 100%. I am a big proponent of universal childcare and the state providing that. I know for a fact a lot of single parents right now are struggling, deciding, do they go to work, do they teach their kids? And if they go to work, their kids sometimes don't have the assistance. They don't have the technology. Let's talk about it. They don't have the laptop or the iPad or the Wi-Fi connection, right? And so 100%, I mean, this is a multifaceted issue. We need universal broadband access. That doesn't exist in our state. We need universal childcare, right? So that the reason I'm talking about universal childcare is for the case where parents want to go to work and they want to have a trusted childcare giver there, right? To provide the whether there's a teaching or the childcare if the child is younger. But yes, I believe those options need to be provided. It's the reason I really value nonprofits, right, who are doing that work. I believe you're one of those people, and I value, the program I work with called First, because they provide a lot of those resources. For example, my students, in my team were able to still participate in a challenge this year. They typically build a robot, but because it wasn't in person, they were able to create an app, right, which is something they could do from the comfort of their home. And so I think it is about supporting the work of the nonprofits that are doing it. The state should make sure that they're supported, because I think, I value those community organizations that are filling in the gaps and they're needed. But I also think the state can help by providing things like universal childcare, by funding schools adequately, by, giving teachers what they need to give the best education, by providing, great homeschool resources, right, for parents that want to homeschool their kids, and things like that, definitely. So I think it should be a partnership, right, between organizations like yours, in being provided that funding and those grants to be able to succeed and fill the gaps. But it should also be the state providing, stability for families that want to make that choice, whether it's they want to homeschool or whether it is, a means of giving more funding to a school because they're returning from COVID and there are large gaps in what they need to make up.
Well, this has been an exciting conversation. So let me ask you a couple of questions as we get ready to conclude. Because again, this issue about, whether we should continue to provide funding for students, parents, and teachers to continue remote schooling or even homeschooling is a big issue, because there's a lot of parents who just believe that they want to get back to normal, right? And there are some who, like myself, believe that the normal wasn't working in the first place. And so definitely with the issue of COVID still lingering, there's no way we should be going back to normal, right? We should be forward thinking and thinking about the opportunities. And there's a lot of data that shows how some students have particularly performed better in this current environment, particularly with the involvement of their parents. And so, for those who have lamented about how our students have fallen behind in comparison to other countries, we should be thinking about how we can use this as a game changer, possibly, especially as it relates to cyber education, because students are now more connected and more aware of cyber education than they ever were, right? With the idea of them all having had to be involved with a multitude of apps during this past year. So let me ask you again, going forward, and again, just as a side note, for anybody who's interested in this issue, we're going to be actually doing a whole advocacy day around this, National Advocacy Day, on May the 26th. And so we look forward to you all participating. We'll hopefully put some information in the chat for you to go ahead and register. But let me just ask you a question as we conclude. And one is, how, if you were, Fatima Iqbal, at age 17, what would you advise, that Fatima, based upon what you know now?
Yes. And I just want to say what you were talking about, though. I think it's very important. Cyber education is, I think, the future. I mean, I think there's opportunity there in doing so much in almost like global learning, right? Like you could learn with people across the world and across the nation at least. And I think there's such value in that, such opportunity there. So I just wanted to add that. What I thought about this question. My 17-year-old self is to not worry so much about what the world thinks of you. Not worry so much about that, but worry about the impact you can make on the world, and in that, see what it is that you are really passionate about, you're really good at, that you can do to change the world. That's something that I didn't have the confidence or the security to do myself at 17 years old. So I would advise anyone who's 17, a teenager, middle school, that age, trying to find themselves, going into themselves, to say, don't ask yourself, oh, what's expected of me, or what do even like my parents want, right? Like, I mean, you need to love and respect your parents, yes, but really look at, you're on this earth for a reason, right? And everyone, I feel like all stakeholders, are important. Every role is important, right? So what is it that really lights your fire, right? What is it that you're really good at, that really you'd want to wake up to every day and do or change? And that's the thing you should really pursue. And that's kind of like a long way of saying, follow your heart, right? Beat to your own drum, or whatever that saying is, follow your heart. So that's what I would tell my 17-year-old self, is to really believe in yourself and believe in what really, makes you smile, what really lights a fire in your heart, and do that.
So lastly, how would you like to be remembered? What contribution would you like to most make in the world before the Almighty, calls for your soul to be returned to Him? What would you like for your children, or those who live beyond you, to recite about Fatima? And let me just tell you, my daughter's name is Fatima, so I love your name. Of course.
No, that's a good name. I like it too. It's the prophet's daughter, right? And it's her daughter. So I think it's her story in itself is very inspiring. And so yes, I'm alhamdulillah, I'm blessed to have that name. But yes, I would want people, and this is going to sound really small, because I believe like it's about how you make people feel. And I hope that I can leave everyone who met me in my life, whether it was someone on the street for a second, or whether it was my husband or my mom, I want them to feel like I made a difference in their life and I touched their life in a positive way. And they felt like they could trust me. And they felt like I was being honest. And, you know, even, whether the little or the most they knew, I just want them to feel like I made them feel a sort of way where they could feel comfortable, right? And that's the impact I hope to leave. And I know that sounds small, but to me, it's huge. Because I think, to me, if if we each thought if we each thought about the actions we just had every day, right? And we each did that as a world, imagine what our world would be, right? We wouldn't have a lot of the issues we have. We wouldn't have hungry. We wouldn't have people that are oppressed if we each did that. So I can only control myself, and you know, I'm one person, and that's part of the reason I'm running too. Is I feel like, hopefully, whatever I do, whether it is walking down the street and meeting a stranger, whether it is being in Sacramento one day, whether it is now being a delegate, being a mom, I hope that whatever role I have, whatever minute I breathe, I make an impact, and I make people think that, okay, Fatima's honest, and I can trust her, and she's not doing this for the limelight or for anything. She's doing this because she really cares, and that's what I want to leave, and that's what I want people to remember me for.
Well, I mean, I can really tell you, Sister Fatima, that this has been a really rewarding conversation. And since you are, you know, running for a delegate, or you're currently a delegate in the Democratic Party, but you're running for to become an assembly member. We call them delegates in Maryland, at least, but to become an assembly member for the state of California. We hope that you will join our National Advocacy Day next month on the 26th of May, which is also on a Wednesday. And we would love for you to perhaps work with us to engage and invite some of the members from the state California, or the California state education system, particularly on this day, this issue of providing funding for parents who want to continue to work from home, both funding to support, you know, employers who will allow their employees to work from home, or providing money to parents who would like to, you know, take off to basically work with their children from home, you know, and to provide, be it, you know, unemployment benefits or some other benefit that won't have the stigma of being called unemployed because you were actually working. Some parents say, well, no, I'm not unemployed. I've been working, you know, even though I'm not at the job that I used to be at, but I'm now at a new job, and that's being the assistant, you know, principal, the assistant, you know, teacher's aide, the, you know, assistant, lunchroom staffer, you know, at my own home school, you know. I mean, so we would love to have you work with us on this National Advocacy Day on the 26th of May, and hopefully get some of those education leaders who are in the state of California to join us. Would you be willing to assist us with that?
Yeah, I'll definitely try to invite as many people as, and I definitely am in the world of education, so I know a lot of those that are doing good work in that area. So I'd love to, have them be a part of it.
Excellent. Well, do you have any last comments before we conclude for this evening?
Yeah, this was a good conversation. I think, you know, I have to say, right, I am running for office. So if you would like to check me out, I know Brother Talib, you did a good job of showing my website, but my website is FatimaForAssembly.com, FATIMAFOR Assembly.com. So if you'd like, you know, what I'm saying and what I stand for, and why I'm running, please feel free to support, volunteer, donate, whatever you can. You could also go on my website, FatimaForAssembly.com, and find my social media where you could follow me there. So I would love to have you be a part of what I'm trying to do here in California, and so glad to have the opportunity to collaborate with you, Brother Talib, on your projects as well.
Absolutely, and I will put your link into the comment section for people who at least want to understand more about your vision and get to know you better. We really appreciate you becoming a partner of STEM4US. We look forward to you participating in our Advocacy Day and you lending your expertise. And we wish you, of course, success in your efforts to try to succeed our former boss, Congressman Merv Dimely, there and in the position that you're running for, and in future endeavors. So again, may the Almighty be with you and your family, both during this month and beyond. and we hope and pray that all of our colleagues who are both observing this month and those who are not will be inspired. This month is a month of sacrifice. It's a month of giving, and it's a month of patience. And so we pray that the Almighty will shower all those gifts upon each and every one of us, and allow us to get back together at our next STEM4US podcast. Again, don't forget to basically subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. Don't forget to put in a question or a comment into the comment box, and don't forget to like this comment and share it with your colleagues, and let's continue to do the good work of supporting our young people, particularly now during this very challenging time. This is Talib Kareem with STEM4US, and we wish you all a very good evening.